All right, guys. So I am here. I'm going to do something I've never done before. This is a reaction to something that I've actually wanted to learn about for quite a while, actually. Um, the Napoleonic Wars. Now, this is brought to us by Epic History TV and History March. March. Um, it's something that I did not learn about in high school, and I don't know about everybody else in their schooling, but we did not at all like touch on Napoleonic Wars. I don't think, other than maybe talking about yeah, was it? I think it was Napoleon who sold the Louisiana Purchase to the U.S. or Louisiana Territory or something. That we learned about that, but other than that, we did not learn about like the actual battles. But it's something I've always wanted to learn about because to me that's a very interesting like period of time in the world. Um, and as a U.S. citizen and from a small town, we were not really exposed to any of that. So I don't really know much. I know a few things. I've heard of Waterloo. I think that's what it's called, like the final uh, battle or town or whatever. So I've heard about that. Napoleon himself, and I think during the Napoleonic Wars, I believe the U.S. or the United States was at war with Britain. A part of it, I think. Um, the War of 1812. So I don't know if that's going to be in these videos, but this is apparently the best series on YouTube for that kind of stuff. I just put in the search bar Napoleonic Wars, and these guys popped up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the the list of videos. There was a lot of videos too. Um, I think, and I don't know if there was like 20 of them or something. I don't. There was a lot, but we'll just go through the list and try to do our best to learn, and we'll see what we can find out about Napoleon. He's kind of a weird figure, in my opinion. I mean, you hear about him in like pop culture. I know there was like a new Napoleon movie, I think, that came out. I didn't see it. I don't know if it's any good, but yeah. So he's kind of a weird figure. Uh, from what I know about him, was just not much. Was he short, or I don't know if that's like a weird thing to say. I'm not trying to be rude, but it was like something I've heard about before. So also, if you hear any noises in the background, my daughter is currently, I guess, learning to talk, kind of. So she's saying a lot of babbling words, just kind of going crazy. So excuse me for that. But we'll get started on this and learn a little bit.
Supported by our sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. In December 1804, in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of the French. Europe had never seen such a sudden and dramatic rise to power. A son of impoverished Corsican nobility to military dictator of France in little more than 10 years.
Yeah, wow.
Revolution and war had cleared Napoleon's path to the throne. War would dominate his 10-year reign. A conflict unprecedented in history that would leave millions dead and a continent in turmoil.
So that is a cool fact that he, achieved so much, I guess, in 10 years, was what they just said. That is a rapid rise. Just going kind of from a low noble, I guess, to emperor. Yeah, that's quick. That's really quick.
8 months after Napoleon's coronation, the French Empire and its Spanish ally were at war with Britain. and Napoleon had assembled an army of 180,000 men along the Channel coast. But as long as the British Royal Navy ruled the seas, invasion was impossible. But nor could Britain challenge France on land. And so British Prime Minister William Pitt tried to build a European coalition against Napoleon, using diplomacy and gold. Britain would prove Napoleon's most steadfast enemy, and its press delighted in relentless mockery of the French emperor. Britain and France were old rivals in Europe and overseas. But now, Pitt feared Napoleon's conquests had made France too powerful. The French emperor had to be defeated, and Europe's balance of power restored if there was ever to be lasting peace. Pitt found willing allies in Europe, among monarchs who despised Napoleon as a product.
Okay, so it looks like we have Naples, okay. Sweden, Adolf. That's a weird name for... Is that a Swedish name? Alexander the First of Russia.
To the French Revolution and a dangerous
Austria,
threat to the existing order. Austria harbored the deepest grievances, having seen her influence in Germany and Italy steadily eroded by French victories. The final straw came in May 1804, when Napoleon had also crowned himself King of Italy in Milan.
Wow, okay.
Austria, Russia,
easy.
Sweden and Naples joined Britain in an alliance known as the Third Coalition, and devised an ambitious plan for a series of joint offensives against France.
Okay.
The main attack would be made by a combined Austro-Russian army, advancing across the Rhine into France. But Napoleon got word of their plans, and reacted with typical speed and decision. He was determined to strike first, before the Allies could join forces, and ordered his army, now renamed La Grande Armée, to march to the River Rhine. His target was the Austrian army of General Mack, which had made a premature advance against Bavaria, a French ally, and was now dangerously isolated from the other Allied armies. Napoleon ordered Marshal Murat, his famously flamboyant cavalry commander, to make feint attacks through the Black Forest, while the rest of his army, advancing at speed, enveloped Mack's army from the north.
Okay.
That summer, Napoleon's Grande Armée was at its most formidable. Well-trained, highly motivated, its regiments at full strength. What's more, it had been newly reorganized according to the corps system, later imitated by virtually every army in the world.
Wait, so... Okay. So I'm guessing what they're saying here is, like, this is the first time there was corps. I'm familiar with that term. I mean, that's a pretty common term. I didn't know it was Napoleonic Wars. That's cool. So Napoleon was the, I guess, brainchild of this system. I'm seeing other names up here. These must be like generals or something. Did anybody else have like anything to do with the corps system? Like, was it just Napoleon's idea, or was it somebody else? I don't know. That seems interesting, though. That's cool.
Each corps, commanded by a marshal, was a mini-army of 15 to 30,000 soldiers,
A marshal.
with its own infantry, cavalry, artillery, and supporting arms, such as reconnaissance, engineers, and transport. This meant each corps could march and fight for a limited time independently, allowing Napoleon to break with the old doctrine of keeping his army concentrated and advance with his corps widely dispersed. This helped to disguise his real objective and increased movement speed, because the army could advance along multiple roads and live off the land, taking its supplies from scattered villages rather than relying on slow-moving supply wagons.
That makes sense.
When the enemy's main force was located, the army could quickly concentrate for battle. This is how Napoleon's army was able to move at a speed that often surprised and disorientated his enemies. Mack
like a blitzkrieg.
didn't realize the danger he was in until it was too late. Napoleon's fast-moving corps crossed the Danube behind him and surrounded his army. Mack launched a series of poorly coordinated counterattacks, but despite some desperate fighting, the Austrians couldn't break out of the trap. Mack hoped that Kutuzov's Russian army could arrive in time to save him, but the Russians were still 160 miles away.
That's a
And
distance.
so, at Ulm, on the 19th of October, just 6 weeks into the war, Mack surrendered his army to Napoleon. The French took nearly 60,000 Austrian prisoners,
Holy cow.
and Napoleon had struck his first devastating blow against the coalition.
How do you even take care of 60,000?
Russian General Mikhail Kutuzov was an experienced and wary commander, more cautious than Mack. His army was exhausted after its 900-mile march from Russia, but hearing of the Austrians' surrender at Ulm, and knowing he wasn't strong enough to face Napoleon alone, he immediately ordered a retreat. Napoleon pursued. The Russians fought several sharp rearguard actions, but could not save the Austrian capital, Vienna, which the French occupied on the 12th of October.
Well, that sucks.
Kutuzov slipped away to Olmütz in today's Czech Republic, where he was joined by reinforcements, as well as Emperor Alexander of Russia and Emperor Francis of Austria in person.
Well, dang.
Napoleon was furious that Kutuzov had escaped. By now his army was also exhausted and far from home, with winter approaching. He needed to force a decisive battle quickly. Fortunately for him, the overconfident 27-year-old Russian emperor sought the glory of battle, overriding the concerns of his veteran commander, General Kutuzov.
27-year-old. Wow.
With the Allied army closing in, Napoleon ordered his corps to rapidly concentrate on a battlefield he had carefully selected, near the town of Austerlitz. Napoleon oversaw the dispositions of his army late into the night, then grabbed a few hours' sleep beside a campfire. Dawn would mark the first anniversary of his coronation as emperor, and promised a battle that would make or break his young empire.
Let us finish this war with a thunderclap. Okay. So what I'm gathering from this is, one, I mean, it seems like a lot of these guys are young. Like 27, or it said Alexander was 27 as the Emperor of Russia. That seems really young. Was that common for like emperors to be sub 30 in age? That's pretty crazy. And then, you know, when they're talking about Napoleon's core system and how fast it you know, apparently went, that reminded me of like the German style blitzkrieg in World War II. You know, that kind of fast movement, able to kind of take your enemies by surprise, hit them hard, and not let them recoup. So I don't know if like blitzkrieg style was like taken from Napoleon, that type of, I don't know if that's, you have anything to do with each other, but it just seems like it's kind of related in that sense. So wow, it didn't really take long either for Napoleon to start winning. That's kind of surprising, I guess.
The morning of the 2nd of December 1805 was cold and bright with a heavy mist.
Not to pause it again, but that's crazy. Look at this map. Like Epic History TV is like going crazy. They're wilding out on this, man. They got like all the cities or the little towns. I'm guessing those are commanders' names. Or were they marshals? What those are called? That's crazy. So how do they know where the locations of these things were? Just was there like a person writing them down during these battles? Like how do they know where like these armies were here and like these armies were here? You know what I mean? Like, oh, here's Austerlitz. That's the name of the thing. But I'm just wondering like how they knew where each one of these were. Is it just like what these guys remember and they just wrote it down? I don't know.
Two armies of near equal size faced each other across a 7-mile wide battlefield. But the Allies held the high ground of the Pratzen Heights, while French Third Corps under Marshal Davout was still marching to the battlefield. Seeing Napoleon's thinly stretched right flank, the Allies planned a large-scale attack from the Pratzen Heights to steamroller the French right
Why would you leave the high ground?
before swinging round to envelop Napoleon's army.
I'd stay on the high ground.
Little did they know, Napoleon was counting on his weak right wing luring the Allies into just such a move, whereupon he would launch his own attack on the Pratzen Heights to cut the Allied army in half. His bold plan relied on his correct prediction of Allied movements, the speedy arrival of Davout's Third Corps on his right, and a perfectly timed counterattack. The battle began around 7 a.m. as Austrian troops of General Kienmayer's advance guard clashed with French troops defending the village of Telnitz. In the face of overwhelming odds, the French fought stubbornly and bravely, but gradually they were forced back. But the Allies, instead of carrying out their great enveloping attack, did nothing. The morning mist and the late arrival of orders had led to confusion and delay, and it was another hour before the first 3 Allied columns were on the move.
Well, that seems
Soon,
dumb.
fierce fighting erupted around Sokolnitz village and castle. Marshal Davout's corps, which had just force-marched 70 miles in 2 days, now arrived to strengthen the French right wing.
That's a long way.
Around 9 a.m., his lead infantry brigade appeared suddenly through the mist and retook Telnitz, before being driven back in turn by Austrian hussars. 2 more of Davout's brigades reinforced French troops at Sokolnitz. As the mist began to clear, Napoleon saw that, as he'd hoped, the Allied left was moving off the Pratzen Heights, and he ordered Marshal Soult's 4th Corps to begin its attack. To the alarm of Allied commanders, 2 French infantry divisions, until now hidden by the mist, were suddenly seen advancing straight towards the Allied centre. General Kutuzov was forced to hurriedly organize a defense of the heights, using troops of 4 column. 2 hours of bloody fighting followed. Musket fire was so rapid and furious that both sides were soon low on ammunition and turned to the bayonet.
Well, I'm not a military strategist, obviously, but was it a good idea to leave the high ground? I'm assuming with cannon, if you have higher elevation, you could potentially shoot further. Does that logic? I don't know if that logic is true, but it seems true in my head. So, if you're on the high ground and they have to come up to you, they have to go up, up the hill, why would you leave it? I guess I don't understand that logic. I'm not a military guy, so maybe there's a good reason. It just seems kind of weird. Weird choice.
By 11 a.m, the French, with the advantage in training and discipline, had secured the heights and driven a deep wedge into the Allied position. To the north, a giant cavalry battle developed. While a Russian force from General Bagration's advance guard captured the village of Bosenitz, before it was halted by cannon fire from the Santon Hill. A decisive charge by 6 regiments of French heavy cavalry finally drove back the Allies, allowing Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps to move forward and seize Blasowitz and Krug. Now, Grand Duke Constantine, commanding the Russian Imperial Guard, led forward this last Allied reserve in a desperate bid to reclaim the Pratzen Heights.
Well, you left them.
A battalion of the French 4th Line Regiment was charged down by Russian Guard cavalry, losing its Eagle standard in bloody fighting. Napoleon, who'd moved up to the heights, sent in his own Guard cavalry. In this grim melee between the elite horsemen of both armies, the French finally prevailed. Napoleon had broken the Allied centre. Now, to close the trap on the Allied left wing, still locked in heavy fighting around Sokolnitz. Around 2 p.m, Napoleon ordered 4 divisions to swing south and cut off their retreat. General Buxhowden, commanding the Allied left, only now saw the danger he was in. Attacked from 3 sides, the only escape was south. Many of his troops were forced to flee across frozen ponds. French artillery opened fire, trying to smash the ice with their cannonballs.
What?
About 200 men and dozens of horses drowned in the freezing water.
Dang, that's not good.
But not the many thousands of Napoleon's propaganda. The French Emperor had won a brilliant victory. His army had taken more than 10,000 prisoners and captured 45 enemy standards. Thousands of dead and wounded of all sides littered the battlefield. Many left untended for days.
A lot more Allied dead.
The Battle of the Three Emperors, as it became known, was a crushing blow to the Third Coalition. As Russian forces retreated back to Russia, Francis I of Austria was forced to accept a humiliating settlement with France, agreeing to pay a 40 million franc indemnity and give up more territory in exchange for peace. But meanwhile, news had reached Napoleon of a disastrous Franco-Spanish defeat at sea off Cape Trafalgar. British Admiral Lord Nelson, at the cost of his own life, had masterminded a victory so complete that it ensured British naval dominance, not just for the rest of the war, but for the next 100 years.
I've heard of Trafalgar, and I didn't realize it was during the Napoleonic Wars, so that's cool. But, I mean, just going back to that previous battle, Austerlitz, I just can't get over the fact that they had the high ground, they left the high ground, and then they had to try to take it back. What was the point? Like, you already had it. I don't know. That's crazy.
Britain, master of the sea. Napoleon, unbeatable on land. The whale and the elephant, neither able to challenge the other in its own domain. When William Pitt received news of Napoleon's victory at Austerlitz, he's supposed to have said, "Roll up that map of Europe. It will not be wanted these 10 years.
Wow.
A month later, Pitt was dead. But his warning that Europe faced another 10 years of war and upheaval was to prove prophetic. Thanks to fellow YouTube...
Okay, that was the first episode in this series. And I have to say that that was a weird. Austerlitz was a weird fight. Like it just seems like it was over so quickly. Um, I guess maybe that's the genius of Napoleon, or um, like his quick movements and his overall abilities as a leader and a commander. Um, but yeah, like I said before, like leaving the high ground seemed like an odd choice. I'm I probably would have stayed up there, but that's just me. Again, I'm not a military leader, obviously. So, but yeah, this is interesting. Learning about Napoleon, and I'm excited to see more about what he can accomplish. As a leader and the Emperor of France. So, if you like what you see here, and you want to learn with me and give me feedback on, if you know anything about Napoleonic Wars, any sort of information about the questions I had, please do so in the comments. I want to know. Um, and I think it's going to be really cool to learn about this going forward, and also the time period itself is interesting to me because I don't know, like I guess as a U.S. citizen, the Civil War happens in the 1800s, um, but we don't really know much about European history in the 1800s. So this is cool. But I want to thank you for stopping by, and we'll see ya.